Hi, I'm Sam Candy. Welcome to Sustain Talks. Today I'm joined by Ben Clifford, Associate Director, Global Health, Safety and Sustainability at Fidelity International. Hello, Ben. How are you?
Hi, Sam. Yeah, I'm good. Thanks. Good to be here.
Yeah, good to have you here. Really interested to hear more about your background and how you got to be doing the job that you're doing.
Yeah, so I've always worked in the sustainability arena. Started off with studying environmental management at university, and then I've worked across a number of different sectors in the field. Starting out at a manufacturing company that made PVC windows, through to kind of the defence sector, into technology, and now working in finance sector as well, covering sustainability as a topic, and then also, as my job title says, health safety as part of that. So yeah, it's an area that I've always worked in.
Okay, and Fidelity is obviously quite a large company. Can you tell us a little bit more about the business, how many buildings, because that'll really set the scene for the conversation today.
Yeah, so I work for Fidelity International. So Fidelity International cover a number of different geographies. Again, our head office is based out of the UK. We have 40 offices across 25 different countries. So mainly in Europe, APAC, India, and more recently Canada as well, is now part of the Fidelity International groups. In terms of what we do, very much a kind of financial services company, providing solutions and advice to varying types of client, whether they're corporate or individual investors. And again, sustainability is core to our business. So we do a lot of work on sustainable investing. And then in my role, it's really looking at the corporate sustainability side and how we approach it as a corporate.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about that a bit more. Your job and your role. So day to day, what does sustainability mean to you? Is it reducing emissions? Is it setting targets? Is it looking at the energy in your building? What the kind of things are you working on?
Yeah. So to give a bit of background, I joined Fidelity around 3 years ago, and again, it was a kind of newly created role in terms of looking at our corporate sustainability element. And in those 3 years, we focused on a number of different areas. I think the priority at the start was really getting our policy and strategy and governance approach right. So quite early on, we created the Corporate Sustainability Committee, which is kind of the senior management forum where we discuss our strategy and our purpose as a business in terms of sustainability, and also put in some of the kind of systems and processes that will enable us to look at what our kind of environmental impact is as a company, assess that, and then looking at some of the programs in which we can improve in terms of our performance. So we've done a lot around data collection over that period. So we've really expanded the scope. Previously, the company was very focused on the UK, mainly because that's our biggest impact, but we've expanded that kind of data collection and calculation of our emissions and other environmental indicators to a global approach. Still on a journey, still areas that we need to improve in terms of that and the scopes that we include within those metrics. But again, really good starting point to allow us to look at what we need to do as a company to improve. So once we've done that kind of data gathering exercise, that allowed us to make some commitments and set some targets around what we want to do and how we want to improve. So quite early on, when we established the Corporate Sustainability Committee, one of the first commitments we made as a company was to set our net zero carbon goal. So I think it was back in 2020, we made that commitment to be net zero for our corporate operations. So again, when you're looking at Fidelity, because we are investment management, looking across all the value chain, there's different elements to our carbon footprint, and we've set different kind of net zero goals for those different areas. So we have the corporate operational goal, which we originally set for 2040. We've recently brought that into 2030 now that we've got better data and a better understanding of what our footprint is. But we're also setting commitments in terms of our investment side as well. So recently we've set a commitment to be net zero by 2050, but also to halve our investment emissions by 2030.
It's interesting you say that. There's been a lot in the press recently about some very large organisations that are setting net zero goals, and some research has been done saying that those companies aren't going to be able to get there. So, like, you've gone through this process, you obviously really look at these measurements, and like for companies, they have to track that really closely, right?
Yeah, exactly, and I think I know the report that you're talking about as well. So again, I think, and this is one of the reasons we've taken slightly different approaches for the different emissions we have. We know for example, on the corporate operations side, we've got a really good handle of what our emissions are and how we can impact them and how we can change them. On the investment side, again, we've set a more long-term goal because we know that there's still a number of unknowns in relation to how we manage that, and again, how we capture the information. Again, data is for me one of the most fundamental things when you're looking at a sustainability agenda, and having that data to show that you are improving. So again, some of that in the investment side is a lot more difficult to consolidate and assess than it is on the operational side, where again we've set more ambitious targets.
Yeah, I take it that travel forms a big part of the emissions in your business, right?
Yeah. So when we did the analysis of our kind of corporate operations, we looked at again all of our scope 1, scope 2, and some of the scope 3. And one of the scope 3 areas that we did look at was business travel. Looking pre-COVID, because COVID's had a huge impact on a number of our different emissions back to 2019, which we've set as our baseline year, because it kind of best reflects kind of business as usual in a non-COVID world. When looking at those direct kind of operational emissions, business travel was 40% of those overall emissions.
Wow.
So it was the second largest behind electricity use. So and electricity use was 50%. So if you look at electricity use and air travel, that's 90% of our kind of operational emissions. So again, we've dedicated 2 specific targets in terms of energy and business travel to tackle those, because again, that's where we're going to have the material impact.
Yeah. So what have been the biggest challenges in trying to be a more sustainable business?
There's a number of different challenges. One which discussed there is around the data. Again, I say if you're not keeping score, you're just practicing. So you're not actually measuring what you're doing. Again, you can't assess how initiatives that you implement impact the overall mission. So I think data and having good data is key. Again, we've done a lot of work recently to look at that, but there's further elements that we need to improve on. Example is, at the moment, we don't have good data around home worker emissions and what kind of materiality they are compared to our office emissions. So that's an area that we're currently working on to define that process and how we capture it. But yeah, I think that the data is an important aspect of that. I don't always think it is difficult to be a sustainable business. I think sustainable practices help you be a better business. It's something that we see on the investment side is companies that have strong kind of ESG or sustainability performance tend to perform better as companies. So I think they do go kind of hand in hand. I think the difficulty we face at the moment is very different to the one that I had previously in early stages of my career. So very early on, we had to kind of fight to get sustainability on the agenda. I think now sustainability is on the agenda for the majority of companies. It's a common language. People understand it, understand climate change and some of the risks we face as businesses, but also as a wider society. So I think that battle is kind of won. I think that the next biggest battle is really helping people understand on how they can contribute to a more sustainable future. I think one of the questions I get asked a lot by employees or peers is, we understand that we need to do something. What can we do? And again, so it's just explaining those different kind of options that people have. And again, business travel is a great example. A lot of it is around choice. So if someone, for example, is doing 7 business trips a year, can we look at how they're traveling? Can they use alternative means? So a lower carbon alternative. So instead of flying, using kind of a train for European kind of transport. Or can we look at those 7 trips and consolidate them into 2 or 3 trips? And combine kind of the activities and just be a bit more smarter around how we travel, which again could halve the emissions associated with those original 7 trips. So I think a lot of it is making sure people are aware that they've got these choices, but also aware of what impact that choice makes in terms of, like you say, things like CO2 emissions associated with the trips.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say. So I recently did a poll and asked what the biggest challenges were, and people said they don't know where to start. But it really is just start by seeing where all your carbon emissions are and measuring it. And, you know, for us, we get that. For most businesses, they're like, measure what? Measure it where? Measure it how? You know, there's a lot of companies out there that are helping, but for smaller businesses to go and measure their data, what are your recommendations how they do that?
So my recommendations is focus on the ones that you can directly impact. So things like, so if you're looking at your carbon footprint, your scope 1, scope 2, again, what you use in terms of gas, what you lose in terms of electricity, you should have good data around that from your kind of energy providers, and you can target those and make meaningful changes. When you move into scope 3, that becomes more difficult. And again, it's really looking at which ones of those are materials. So we've, again, really focused on, in terms of our scope 3, our travel, our waste, emissions associated with the waste we produce, the water that we use at site, again, because we can get good data. So really focus on the ones where you can get good data and you can have a direct impact, because then you will see the improvement. I think once you've done that initial stage, then move on to the more kind of complex areas like supply chain, where, again, it can be really difficult to get granular data around emissions associated with it. A lot of it is done on estimations based on spend. And again, the only way you can really reduce that then is by reducing spend. So again, when you're looking at supply chain, maybe target your top kind of 5 suppliers, work with them to get the more granular data, and work with them to see how, again, the services that they're providing to you, you can reduce the emissions associated with those.
Yeah, I hear a lot about that working with suppliers, and I know that so many procurement people are putting in more questions around supply chain and their emissions and their impact. Are you starting to put a set of questions in? And, you know, a lot of people say, oh, it's just a tick box, and is it being checked thoroughly?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, in terms of our supply chain, we're really focusing on kind of 3 areas at the moment. So one is kind of ESG monitoring. So we've recently implemented a tool called EcoVadis, which is helping us do that. Again, EcoVadis is quite a good platform because it again, rather than suppliers having several different questionnaires with similar questions but slightly different, there's one platform that various suppliers can use, and they can use the information from that. So again, that's the starting point to understand how sustainable our supply chain is. But back to what you were saying, we need to use that information as well. So as part of that questionnaire, we can use the emission data, we can look at the kind of our spend with that supplier, and then have a look at how that affects our kind of carbon footprint as a company, and looking across the value chain. So it's really about using that information. The other area we're focused on supply chain is around supply diversity. I think we're really conscious that we want to have a diverse supply chain, and again, it's very easy to always go to the large providers in a certain sector or a certain region, but what we've really done is embed within our kind of supply selection process that diversity aspect. So we offer it at least to one diverse supplier, and they have a chance to kind of contribute on that aspect. And then the kind of final one in terms of supply chain is being a kind of responsible client. So that's really about, do you know what I mean, especially for some of these smaller businesses, making sure that we're paying them on time, that again, that when they invoice, there's a smooth process there, so we can manage that. So again, those are kind of the three areas that we're looking at. So I think it's both looking at what the supplier performance is in general, how they can impact our emissions, but then also how we can work with them and help them to develop as well, especially with those smaller suppliers and companies.
I'm hearing that so much more. It's about a collaboration. You know, it used to be terribly that, oh, we'll pay them late, and now it's really changed actually, and people are thinking a lot more about, let's help the smaller suppliers and the SMEs on that journey to come alongside with you and see if you can help them and guide them and educate them.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. What are, you know, you've obviously been working hard over the last few years putting this together. What are your goals for 2022?
So in terms of the 2022 goals, and maybe we can focus on our 2024 goals, because what we did last year was, at the early stage when we established the committee, is we really wanted to look at, again, we set this long-term commitment to be net zero by 2030. But what we need to do is have some interim goals to make sure that we're on track to achieve that long-term target and give kind of integrity to that long-term commitment. So using kind of 2019 as the baseline year, we set a kind of 5-year program to reduce some of the key environmental impacts that we have. So some of them I've mentioned. So we set for energy use a 25% reduction over that 5-year period. For carbon emissions, again covering scope 1, scope 2 and part of our scope 3, including business travel, to reduce by 25%. Also business travel, we felt that we could be more ambitious, so we set a 50% reduction target in terms of business travel, and specifically air travel, because again that makes up the large proportion of our business travel. And then we also looked at other kind of key environmental impacts as well. So as we looked at the data and did our analysis around the different sites, we set targets in terms of our waste. So we're looking to increase our recycling rate up to 80%, but also reduce the overall waste by 25%. And then we're also looking to reduce water use, again by 25%, and paper use as well, because we use a lot of paper that we don't necessarily need to use when we've got kind of digital solutions. So again, we set a 50% reduction target there. So again, that was 2024 goals, and those are the areas that we focused on. Again, over the last kind of 2 years, we've been focusing on really getting the systems, getting the data right, and this year we're really looking at the different initiatives that we can implement to achieve those 2024 goals. So in 2022, there's some of the key activities we're looking at. One is to get certification for our management system. So we're looking to go through the ISO certification process. Again, we want to be credible in terms of what we're saying we're doing and how we operate, and having that external kind of verification of our management system will definitely help that. And also the other key aspect for 2022 is looking at our net zero roadmap. So we've got our net zero roadmap up to 2030. We've been doing a lot of activities, not just on the data side, but also assessing our sites. So we've been doing energy audits, decarbonisation audits across the sites, and we're using kind of the outputs from those audits to set kind of dedicated decarbonisation paths for the sites where we've done the audits, but also take some of the principles from those to apply to some of the smaller sites or some of the other regions as well. So again, those are two big areas of focus for 2022.
Busy year for you then, eh?
Yes, yeah, lots to do.
It doesn't stop, does it? For somebody that's just starting out, there's a lot of roles coming up in sustainability. Where would you suggest, if someone's starting out, should they be reading articles and learning and educating themselves and counting their carbon emissions, obviously? But where should they start?
I think there's a number of different areas. I think, and again, it relates to one of the areas that we're focusing on this year at Fidelity. What has steered me well in terms of moving across industries, and again, looking in different roles in terms of sustainability. Fundamentally, the management system approach is that consistent, that's across all industries. So I'd really encourage people to look at the ISO 14001 standard, get some training around the standard, understand how to do internal audits in relation to the standard, because again, that's applicable to any business, whatever industry that you're in. And like I said, it's really it's done me well as I've moved between different roles and within different industries. So again, that'd be a really good area of focus. I think, again, everyone knows, and I think you see across media, climate change is the biggest risk, not just to businesses, but also to wider society. So I'd really focus on that area. And look at how you could develop your career. Again, it's a big focus for Fidelity, because we see that as our biggest environmental impact and the biggest area that we can make change, both on the corporate and the investment side. And I think it's not a kind of flash in the pan. This is here to stay. It's a long-term program. And again, we've set our kind of 2030 goal, but that's not where we're going to be finished looking at climate change. There's still going to be areas that we need to focus on and improve. So I think those are two big areas that you can look at. And again, I think from a kind of professional perspective, join the membership associations. They're really good at collaborating with peers on different topics, learning from each other, and also gives you kind of credibility, like you say, being a chartered environmentalist, etc. Really helps you in moving forward in your career.
Yeah. Just to finish, I always like to ask this question: is there anyone in sustainability that inspires you, or books people should read?
Yeah, it's a good question. Actually, I've read a book recently, which probably covers a couple of those aspects. So I read a book, it's called The Future We Choose, and it was written by Christina Figueres. I hope I pronounced that right. But she was the kind of the chief she was the chief coordinator of the Paris Agreement. So again, I really look up to her, because at the time, again, there was a lot of disagreements around climate change, who was responsible for it. Obviously, the developed countries generated most of the historical emissions in terms of greenhouse gases. The developing countries were using and investing in kind of practices such as coal to improve their economy. And to be able to get all those different countries with all the different perspectives in terms of climate change to agree on a single goal to align to a less than 2 degree warming was a massive task. So again, someone that looked up to, and the book kind of explains the future that we can choose. So again, we're at a point now in history where there's a number of different paths we can choose. One, again, where we move on and we address climate change with the urgency that's needed, and one that's not. And she reflects in the book 2 different scenarios in terms of what the world would look like in 2050. But it also gives some really practical examples in which people can make changes now, both in their personal life, in the choices that they make, or also in their professional life as well. So yeah, really, really good book, and a very positive spin on the challenge, because again, we do have a choice, and every choice that we do make will add to an overall impact in terms of reducing climate change. But yeah, one that I'd recommend.
Sounds brilliant, and yeah, an amazing woman. And I think the Paris Agreement was really, where people started to wake up. So Ben, thank you so much for your time. This has been brilliant, and I'm sure that companies that are starting out, or even if they're on their journey, are going to learn so much from this. So I really, really appreciate your time, and thanks for joining me.
No, it's been brilliant. Yeah, no, thanks for inviting me along, and it was good to speak to you, Sam.
Have a good day. Bye.